Good morning and welcome to another program of Study the Word. This is sponsored every week by the Kirkwood Church of Christ that meets at 948 South Geyer Road in Kirkwood, Missouri. We're glad you've joined us. In just a few moments, we're going to be dealing with a Bible question and we're going to provide a Bible answer. That's what we do each and every week. My name is Chuck Bartlett. I'm the minister for the church there. And folks, if you have a Bible question, we'd love to hear from you. That phone number is there for you to give us a call. Leave it on voicemail and we'll use your question on this program. The website there is also for you to go back and check our archives. We upload all our past TV programs there for you to check out. And so please take advantage of that. Now that phone number that you have there can also be used to take advantage of our free Bible study helps, which I'll mention at the end of the program. And I'll put that phone number up for a longer period of time. So have a pen and paper handy. Okay, so what is our question this week? Our question is, what should I know about Satan? Well, there are some bad things that we need to be aware of. Obviously, when you think of Satan, we're thinking of something that is evil, something that is bad. But we're also going to provide you with some information, some good news that centers around Satan. So we hope you'll stay tuned for the whole program today. So first of all, there's some bad things that we need to be aware of when it comes to Satan. Well, the first thing that we need to be aware of is that he cares nothing for you or me or anybody else. This is made abundantly clear way back in the beginning in Genesis, the 3rd chapter. Let me just acquaint you with a little bit here. It says in verse 1, "Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. The serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die." Now, you have to picture what's going on here. You have Adam and Eve that are in a state of innocence. They haven't done anything wrong. They were naked, as you continue to read on here. The consequences of taking the fruit, they saw that they were naked and they immediately clothed themselves. That innocence is almost like if you have a 2-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl and you give them a bath together. They're not thinking anything dirty or filthy. They're innocent. Adam and Eve were innocent. Now, having pictured them in the garden and God providing all that they needed, the serpent comes along and you have to ask yourself, why did the serpent do this? Why did he come up to her and deceive her? And the answer is obvious. He cared nothing for Eve, cares nothing for Adam, doesn't care about God, doesn't care about mankind. We need to be aware of his attitude. Of course, you can see this over in the book of Job if you just read the first couple of chapters there, where Satan is going back and forth and trying to find somebody to destroy. And God said, Hey, have you considered my servant Job? And of course, Satan's attitude is clear. And it was revealed in that text because he tells God, he says, you know what? Nobody serves you just because they want to. You know, Job's only serving you because of the wealth that he has and all the success. Well, God said, well, okay, go ahead and take that away from him. Don't harm him. And so he takes away his wealth, and Job still holds true to God. And Satan doesn't get that because Satan doesn't care about God. He doesn't care about anybody, and he doesn't want anybody to care about God. You need to be mindful of that. And even when his health was taken away, Satan can't grasp why somebody would lose their health and still remain faithful to God. He doesn't get it. So again, let's be mindful of the fact that Satan cares absolutely nothing for you. Secondly, and we already read it back there in Genesis, but in John chapter 8 and in verse 44 in the New Testament, we're given some information here that we already read an example of it, but I'll just go ahead and read what it says here. It says, Jesus is doing the talking, and he says in verse 43, "Why do you not understand my speech? Because you're not able to listen to my word." He says in verse 44, "You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it." That's what you need to know about Satan. He's the father of lies. He wants people to believe lies. And he has a lot of people today who are telling lies. This is why we do this program. There's a lot of false teaching in this world. There's a lot of people believing things that are just not true. And we're trying to help people. But let's understand who's behind all this, because Satan, from the beginning, he told Eve, you won't die. No, that's not going to happen. Even though that's what God said, Eve went ahead and believed what he had to say. And so that's what we need to be mindful of. Now in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and in verse 4, it says that he is the God of this world. Small letter G. He's the God of this world. That's what you need to know about Satan. This is why the Father wants us to not be a part of this world. Over in the book of John, he tells us in 1 John, the 2nd chapter, as he mentions and talks about the world, he says in verse 15, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Well, what's in the world? He says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, it's not of the Father, but is of this world." And Satan just wants us to love this world. Why? He's the father, or the God of this world, is what it said there in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And so, again, his true colors are revealed within the scriptures. You and I need to be aware about these things concerning him. And I think, obviously, the most important thing we need to remember, they're all important, but one more thing. In 1 Peter chapter 5, what you and I need to know about Satan is he wants to devour us. Now he mentions this over in 1 Peter chapter 5. He says in verse 8, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." Now you may ask, okay, why does he want to devour us? Well, that's why we talked about the first point. He doesn't care a lick about you. Couldn't care less whether you're happy or whether you're sad, whether you have good fortune or bad fortune. He doesn't care. He just simply does not care. Now you could debate all night long and say, well, why doesn't he care? The point is he is evil and he wants to devour you. He doesn't want you to be righteous in any way. Godliness should be the furthest thing from you in his sight, because that's the furthest thing from him. Now, having said all of that, I want us to spend more time on looking at some positive things. Not some positive things about Satan per se, but it does pertain to him. And I think it's going to help us and give us some reassurance that we need in this world of darkness. Because a person might say, wow, if he doesn't care about me, and he's the father of lies, and he's the God of this world, and he just wants to devour me, well, what hope have I got? Well, let's learn some things on the positive side when it comes to Satan. Not positive things about him, but let me explain. We're going to go back to the book of James, and we're in the 4th chapter. In verse 7, it says, "Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. So what do we learn here about Satan? Well, it says Satan can be resisted. You know, a lot of people say, you've heard this saying in the past. I remember a comedian in the past would say, well, the devil made me do it. Well, no, because it says right here that you can resist the devil. So when you read through the whole Bible and you find people doing things that are evil, you will also read where they are being punished for their wrongdoing. Now, why would you punish anybody for doing something that is wrong if they had to do it? Well, that wouldn't be right. Could you imagine a parent punishing their child because of something that they couldn't help? It's not their fault. It's like, if you punished a child, for example, if you told a 4-year-old, now I want you to take that refrigerator and take it downstairs. Well, you're asking them to do something they can't do. And if they don't do it, what parent would punish the child? Well, first of all, what parent would ask the child to do that? But secondly, why would you punish a child for something they couldn't do? And so the fact that throughout the scriptures that people were punished for doing any sin tells you what? You can't say that I had to do it. You can't say that. So because we're reading here that you can resist the devil and he will flee from you. Does everyone do that? Of course not. Is anybody perfect? No. Other than when Jesus walked on the face of this earth? No. But I'll have more to say about that as our lesson winds down here in just a few minutes. So, first of all, we learn on the positive side, as evil as Satan is, he can be resisted. To add more to that, and which should bring us some comfort, is what we read over in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We are told that Satan is limited in what he can do. You realize that? Just kind of like when you read back in Job, God would put conditions about what Satan could do and could not do when it came to tempting Job. We find here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13, he says, "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." So what that verse is telling us, folks, is that God is aware of you. He's aware of Satan. He's going to limit him. What does that mean? He's not going to allow him to do something to you that you don't have the ability to resist, to walk away. In other words, none of us can ever say that I had to sin. Or, we could say, if somebody says, this was just too much for me to bear, well, then you're not trusting in God, because God is saying, you can handle this, because I've put limitations on Satan that he's not going to tempt you beyond, he's not going to go beyond your ability to resist. And that's a comfort, because Satan thinks that he's stronger than God, and he's not stronger than God. As a matter of fact, God demonstrates right here that, I know what Satan is up to, and I am allowing him to tempt mankind. Okay. And you might say, well, why does God allow Satan to tempt people? Because God knows that if man would rely on him, they can resist Satan. And that's really the goal of the Christian, is to rely on the strength that God can give us. Paul told the Philippian brethren, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we definitely need that strength from him. What I find, since we're talking about temptation, what we learn about Satan, and get this, he cannot make you sin. Remember I said a moment ago where people might say the phrase, the devil made me do it? Well, in the book of James, the first chapter, we actually learn how sin comes about. And we can go back and we can look at Eve that we read earlier, and talk about Job, and we can talk about all the transgressions you read in the Bible. Not just the transgressions, but you can talk about the times when other people were tempted and they resisted. We could look at Jesus in Matthew chapter 4 when he was tempted and he resisted the wiles of the devil. Now what we're noticing here in James chapter 1 is how sin comes about. Okay? So it tells us here, beginning in verse 14 of James 1, but each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire hath conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. So what we're learning here is what causes sin. And that is, well, when you're tempted. Now, temptation is not a sin, folks. It's when you give in to that temptation. Jesus was tempted in all points as you and I, but he did not sin. So the reason why Satan is referred to as the tempter, because that's all he can do. He cannot make you, he cannot make me sin. He can make it pretty difficult, though, to resist. The temptations might be pretty strong, but then I remember, wait a minute. God is going to limit Satan. He knows my capability. God knows my limitations. That's what's so wonderful about our God. He knows what I can and cannot handle. And when something comes my way, when I am being tempted to sin, I need to tell myself, I can resist this. Because God is not going to allow anything to come upon me that I'm not able to. So I can't blame anybody else. I can't blame circumstances of life. I can't point the finger at somebody else. And I can't even point my finger at Satan and say, it's his fault. No. When you sin, it's because you gave into your own desires, which when we go back to Genesis chapter 3, you can read that. God rebuked Eve because what happened? When the serpent told Eve, you will not surely die, when God told her she would, she looked at the fruit and she desired it. She took it, she ate of it, and she gave it to Adam, and he ate too. And then they hid themselves from God. And then God came looking for them. And when Adam revealed that they hid themselves because they were naked, he was like saying, who told you you were? Did you eat the fruit? And of course, God knew that all along. And they were all punished. Eve was punished. Adam was punished. Even the serpent. But the point is, why was Eve punished? Why was Adam punished? The point is that she didn't have to take that fruit. What happened? She was tempted. That's all he can do. Now you might say, well, Chuck, that's easy to say. That's all he can do. Temptation can be pretty strong. I know that. This is why everybody has sinned. In Romans chapter 3 and verse 23, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. What does that mean? Well, according to James chapter 1, we all gave in to temptation at one time as we matured, like Adam and Eve. You know, Adam and Eve, there was a time when there was no sin in the world, but then they sinned. Why did they sin? It's a good question. Well, they sinned because they were tempted. That's right. And they gave in to that temptation. That's correct. And that's what brings forth sin. You and I today, why is it that we sin? I don't sin because of Adam and Eve. I sin because I faced with a temptation and I gave in to that temptation, and that brought forth sin. And nobody has resisted all the temptations, again, as I said earlier, other than Jesus himself. So, having said that, we need to spend some time talking about one more important positive thing when it comes to Satan, and that is, since we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God, we could all stop following him. All those who have sinned, of course, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's the bad news. Now, the good news is we can stop following him. See, Romans, the 6th chapter, talks about the fact that there's a time when we are a slave to sin. You know, that we're following the god of this world. And he mentions, we'll pick it up in verse 13 of Romans 6, he says, Do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. He went on to say in verse 16, Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one slaves whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to righteousness? Now look what he says in verse 17. But God be thanked that though you were slaves of sin, and that's what Satan wants. He wants you to be a slave to sin. He wants you to do whatever you want. Don't listen to God. And when you do break God's law, don't go back to him. Don't make it right. See, that's what he's about to talk about right here. Paul says in verse 17, But God be thanked that though you were slaves of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine to which you were delivered, and having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. So all of us are slaves in the sense where either you're a slave to sin or you're a slave to righteousness. And that's the choice that you and I get to make. Now, we know Satan has a lot of followers. Jesus talked about that in Matthew chapter 7, that there's a broad road that leads to destruction, and there are many going down that road. But I like the fact that he says over in John chapter 14, that he says, in my Father's house are many mansions. Now, why would there be plenty of room in heaven when there's a narrow road and only a few are going to make it? Why many mansions? Because everybody could resist, but not everybody does. Everybody can stop following him and start following the Lord, but not everybody will. It's only going to be the faithful few. You can be a part of that. That is the choice. You're the one that determines whether you're going to follow Satan or follow the Lord. That is all on you, folks. Again, all he can do is tempt you. He has never made anybody sin. He's never made me. When I've done something wrong, it's always my fault when I've sinned. People may have tempted me to do the wrong thing, but nobody can make me sin, not even Satan himself. And so this is why understanding these things about Satan is so important. Those negatives are certainly there, that he doesn't care about you. And he wants you to believe lies. And he wants to devour you. You need to say to yourself, I don't want to serve him. I want to serve the Lord. And this is why we do this program, because we're trying to help people to be aware of what Satan is up to and how that there is hope through Jesus Christ. And we want to help you to learn more about what the Lord wants you to do, because you can resist the devil. You can have that blessed hope of eternal life, not to be a part of that lake of fire that is reserved for the devil and his angels that the scriptures talk about. So every week we want to make known to you that we have a free home Bible study course. You're going to learn about how you can turn away from following Satan and making sure that you are on that narrow road. What do you mean making sure? Well, because he's the father of lies. And he has been very successful, especially in the religious realm. Most of the conversations that Jesus had to deal with were with religious people who rejected him. It was religious people that had him crucified. Folks, just being religious doesn't mean you're right. So we need to make sure what we believe is in accordance with the Word of God. And that 6-lesson home Bible study course, it opens up the eyes to a lot of people of knowing what the false teaching is out there and knowing what the Bible has to say. And we want to encourage you to become familiar with the scriptures. 6 short lessons, doesn't take long to go through them. We'll send that first lesson out to you tomorrow morning, Lord willing. And once you're finished with that, you pop it into the return envelope that we provide with a stamp on it. We'll look over your lesson. We'll return it to you. and we'll enclose lesson number 2. It doesn't take long to finish 6 lessons. Now, what we can also do, if you're interested in taking that, perhaps you're interested in the 2 pamphlets that we offer. 40 things that people are saying the Bible teaches, but it doesn't. So those are 40 lies that are being taught. People are saying, this is in the Bible. It's really not. And all kinds of religious people today, religious leaders are teaching those things. So you need to look at them. And then the other one is 30 things that people are saying it's not in the Bible when it really is. Those are 30 more lies. So we're talking about 70 lies that are out there. And you can look at the verses. When people say it's not in the Bible, and you can open up your Bible, well, no, it is. There it is right there. You need to request those pamphlets. You can be put on the mailing list for our weekly bulletin if you would like. Just we need your name and address. And, of course, what a lot of people seem to enjoy, and that is a face-to-face Bible study. We just come with our Bibles open. We sit around the kitchen table and we study, whether in your home or maybe we can meet at the church building if you're comfortable there, or at a coffee shop. You can bring some other people if you'd like, but we could have a face-to-face Bible study, open up the scriptures, and learn together. We offer that to you, a time that fits into your schedule, whether during the week, mornings or afternoons or evenings. I met with a gentleman last week. We met at 8:30 in the morning. We've studied with some other people at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every week. One's at 1 o'clock. Other people in the evenings. If you'd like to have a class after work, after supper, we can get together. Or the weekend would work. If you're interested in any of these things, the correspondence course, the pamphlets, the bulletin, or face-to-face, you see that phone number, call it, leave it on voicemail, or text us. That's even faster. We'd love to hear from you. And folks, if you're ever in the Kirkwood area, we'd love to have you come and be with us. We meet every Sunday morning at 9:30 for a Bible study. And then we meet for worship at 20 after 10. We meet again Sunday afternoons at 5 o'clock for another hour of worship. And then a midweek Bible study every Wednesday at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8. We have classes for all age groups, so bring the whole family. We'd love to have you. Come by and say hello. It has been so encouraging to us, the amount of TV viewers that have come and visited with us and worshiped and observed what we do, because there's no pressure. We don't expect anything. What you can expect is to be met with a friendly smile, maybe a handshake, and you can come and just observe and see what takes place. But we'd love to have you. You'd be our honored guest. Now, folks, we hope you're going to be back here next week, because we have another interesting Bible question that has come our way, and we'll open up the scriptures together. Be sure you tell your friends and your neighbors about this program, because we're going to be doing this every week as we open up our Bibles and we study the Word. Thank you for being with us today, folks. Have yourselves a great day.